This is an Echo PAS Pro Attachment Series 2620. And here I have a trimmer as well as an edger. This combo costs about $700. Is it worth it? Well, let's talk about it. If you are a homeowner, a single owner operator type deal, or you have a small crew that works for your landscaping or lawn care type of business, then this may be the solution to all your answers. All your answers. All your answers. I'm joking. We all know the saying is, this may be the solution to all your problems, not solutions, okay? However, if you have more than that, and you want to kind of see what I think about this piece of equipment, well then, stand fast. The 5 things I want to cover is really the cost, because that determines whether or not you're actually going to buy it. The weight of it, right? And the ergonomics. So like, how does it control? How does it feel? Type thing. The power itself. The versatility. And why you would want to buy something that's not single function. And then really just my overall thoughts. I think one of the biggest factors of whether or not most people are going to buy this piece of equipment, or really any equipment, is how much does it cost? What is the damage in our pockets? So this setup that I have my invoice right here, and basically the head itself cost me $368. The trimmer attachment was $109, and then the edger was $193. I did have some pest killer on my invoice, which cost like 25 bucks or so. However, out the door without that, it costs approximately $700 for this setup. Now, you may say, damn, that's pretty expensive. I could just buy a single function unit for a lot less. And I would say that you are right. But the beauty about this is that though when you only purchase it or compare it to one other unit that's similar in function, then this setup is more expensive. However, it gets cheaper and cheaper as you continue to buy different types of attachments. Now, the more attachments that you buy, the cheaper that this product actually seems and will be. Echo makes for this specific model, and I think they're all pretty much the same, is 15 different functions. Now that includes the stuff that I have, chainsaws, I believe, some brooms, some blowers, just a variety of different things that you would use to make your property look better. The second thing I want to cover really is the weight and the ergonomics of this piece of equipment. Now, it's going to change and fluctuate depending on what attachment that you actually have and that you're hooked up to. However, the head itself is 10 pounds dry. And ultimately, when they say that from the factory, is the dry just means without the liquid, so without fuel and whatever other things that it takes to run. Now, the reason that ergonomics is so important is because ergonomics is ultimately what is going to wear and tear on your body. And if something just is out of balance or just feels weird or awkward, well then it's going to wear out your body and your crew members' bodies, and just not going to be a fun experience, especially if you're doing this for a living. Ergonomics wise, it's not terrible. I will tell you, depending on the type of attachment that you put on this thing will determine the ergonomics of it. So it may feel a little more balanced or less balanced depending on what head that you actually have. So the engine side of it is 10 pounds. So if the other side or the attachment isn't in similar weight, then you are going to kind of be struggling back and forth with it. And that's why a lot of people get the Derwin grip. The other thing is, though it's not specifically right-handed, the grip itself has a slight angle. And if you're like me and you're left-handed, well then it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's not great for you. So switching out with the Derwin grip may be a great option. Here are my two attachments. We have our trimmer and then our edger. And when you look at these right off the bat, you can tell that one is going to be significantly heavier than the other, just based on the materials used. A lot of plastic and some aluminum, and then this has some steel and some metal. Now, you might think that the trimmer is actually going to be a little bit more friendlier on the body, and I would say that you're actually wrong. And surprisingly, that this edger probably weighs about 10 pounds. I don't know exactly, I didn't weigh it. However, what I'm trying to say is that the head or the power head is 10 pounds as well. When I put this attachment on, it counterbalances each other. So yes, the weight of the overall equipment maybe is 20 pounds, but when I'm slinging it around, it actually feels a lot less than the trimmer. I'm not fighting gravity on trying to keep it stabilized. The next thing that we need to talk about is the power. The power of this engine is going to determine how effective and how efficient that you can complete your job. And if your piece of equipment, whether it's the edger or the trimmer, is bogging out and dying, well then it's pretty much useless. Now, Echo makes the PAS 2620, which is the attachment series, and then they make a single function unit where it's just a trimmer, a 2620. And what you'll see is that Echo does not give specifics on horsepower ratings on this model, the PAS system, but they do give it on the single function. The reason I believe that they do it that way, even though they share the same 25cc engine, is because the static loss that happens. Think about it as in a car. Your horsepower of your engine is slightly different than the wheel horsepower. And that is because as the engine goes through a transmission, through a drive shaft, through the drivetrain, it loses power. It's the same idea. As the engine goes through the pole or the drive shaft to the actual attachment, it loses a little bit of power. But based on the other model, the single function, it is somewhere between a 1.25 and 1.5 horsepower. And so far, I've only used this piece of equipment a couple times and had no issues. Seems pretty powerful to me. The next thing is the versatility. And we kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, but Echo PAS system allows for up to 15 different attachments, and they all do different things. Rather than buying 15 different tools, you only have to buy one and then add the attachments. The other cool thing about having this specific unit is because it's not a single rod or single shaft unit, you are able to take this 6 foot tall unit and break it down into half the size. So you can throw this in the back of a car if you need to. So space is limited, this may be a great option. It becomes a little bit safer, you can secure it a little bit better, things like that. But it comes at a cost, like I said. And that cost is that if you're not a single owner operator or have one crew, or you're just not a careful person, you can break these things and damage them a lot easier than its counterpart. I'm not saying that this isn't durable, but the more pieces that you have, the more likely it can get damaged. And that's where I'm going with this, is that this is a good unit and it's a commercial type of unit, but the problem is switching out heads and just throwing parts or throwing pieces of equipment around, this will get dinged up and then you'll have a broken machine pretty easily. All right, so here are my thoughts and the final verdict. If I only needed one or two tools, whether that's an edger, a trimmer, or whatever the case may be, well then I would buy those solo. However, if I needed 3 or more tools, and I looked at the Echo catalog for the PAS system, then it's actually worth its while because you'll actually break even or better in price. So the more attachments you buy, the more that the price kind of evens out and you actually get a better deal. Secondly, if I had a large company, more than 1 or 2 crews, then I would not buy this system either. And that is because the more pieces, the more likely they are to get damaged. So that's kind of my verdict. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please consider subscribing, and I'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.